The moment I realized I was done loving my son, not done caring, not done hurting, but done being the kind of mother who would protect him from his own consequences, I was sitting at my kitchen table holding a bank statement that showed a balance of $0. He had taken $54,000. Every cent I had left in this world. And somewhere across the country I knew he was laughing. So I put down the statement, picked up my tea, and I made a decision that would take 2 years, and cost him everything. If you've ever been betrayed by the one person in this world you never thought would do it, stay with me. Because what I did next, most people wouldn't have the patience for. But it worked. And by the end of this story, you'll understand exactly why. My son Marcus was 34 years old when he took that money. I want you to hold that number for a moment. 34. Not a teenager making a reckless mistake. Not a young man drowning in his first real crisis. A 34-year-old man with a wife, a mortgage, and a marketing firm that had been bleeding money for 2 years, who looked at his mother's life savings and made a calculated decision. The thing people never understand about being betrayed by your child is that the wound isn't shaped the way you expect. It isn't hot and sharp the way anger is. It's cold. It's the specific cold of realizing that the person who called you every Sunday morning, who still kept a photo of the two of you on his desk, the gap-toothed 7-year-old version of him grinning at the camera, the version of him I had loved so completely it felt like a physical thing, had looked at that love and quietly decided to use it against me. 'Cause that is what Marcus did. He didn't steal from a stranger. He stole from someone who trusted him so completely she had never once checked what he was doing with the account access she'd given him. I gave him that access 18 months before the morning of the bank statement. I had been recovering from a knee replacement, confined to the house for 6 weeks, and Marcus had offered to manage the household bills while I was on my feet. He was attentive that month. Flowers on the kitchen table. Groceries dropped off without being asked. I remember thinking, watching him carry bags through the door, that I had done something right after all. What I didn't know was that Marcus had just found out his firm was going to miss its 3rd consecutive payroll. He needed a solution. I was the solution. And he was patient enough to wait 18 months before he used me. The $54,000 went out in 4 transfers over 11 days. Small enough individually to avoid automatic flags. Large enough collectively to represent every dollar I had saved in 40 years of teaching 3rd grade. My pension covered my monthly expenses. Just barely. But that savings account was the buffer between me and disaster. It was the new roof if the old one failed. It was the medical bill if something went wrong. It was the margin between living and surviving. Marcus knew that. I had told him more than once, over Sunday morning phone calls, that I still thought were real. He transferred the money on a Tuesday, a Thursday, the following Monday, and the Monday after that. I found out on a Wednesday 3 weeks later, when I sat down to pay my quarterly insurance premium. I have thought a great deal in the 2 years since, about what I felt in that first moment. People expect rage. People expect tears. What I actually felt, sitting at that kitchen table with a statement in my hand and my tea going cold, was something much quieter and much more dangerous. Felt clarity. For the first time in years, every fuzzy, forgivable, excusable thing Marcus had ever done came into sharp focus all at once. The loan he never repaid. The holiday he didn't come home for because the flights were too expensive, but somehow managed to book a ski trip the same week. The way he spoke to me when his wife was in the room, slightly too casual, slightly too dismissive, performing for an audience of one. The Sunday morning calls that had quietly become monthly, and then occasional, and then only when he needed something. I saw it all, clearly, once. And instead of calling him, I put the statement in the kitchen drawer, finished my tea, and picked up the phone to call my neighbor Diane. "Are you free this afternoon?" asked her. "I need to talk to someone sensible." What followed over the next 3 months was the quietest, most methodical thing I have ever done in my life. I told no one in the family. Not my sister. Not Marcus's aunt, who adored him and would have called him within the hour. I smiled at every family group message. I sent Marcus a photo of my garden on his birthday with a note that said the roses were coming in beautifully this year. He replied with a thumbs up emoji. Meanwhile, I had consulted a lawyer named Helen, who had an office above a pharmacy on the high street and a reputation, Diane told me, for being absolutely unmovable once she decided to help someone. Helen did not tell me what to do. She told me what was possible. Then she told me what was provable. Those turned out to be very different lists, and understanding the difference was the most important education I received in those 3 months. I also consulted my accountant, a meticulous man named Bernard who had done my taxes for 22 years. Bernard, it turned out, had kept records that Marcus almost certainly didn't know existed. Records that showed, in precise and dated columns, exactly how much money had moved between us over the years, and exactly what Marcus had told me each transfer was for. Plumbing emergency, his wife's medical bills, a business tax shortfall that would have cost more to ignore, a gap in payroll that he promised, 3 times in writing, to repay within 90 days. He had never repaid a single one. Bernard printed everything out and placed it in a folder with a green cover. He handed it to me across his desk and said very quietly, "Margaret, I think you have everything you need." I drove home, put the green folder next to the bank statement in the kitchen drawer, and made a shepherd's pie for dinner. Marcus found out what I had done on a Friday morning in February, 14 weeks after I had first opened that bank statement. He found out because Helen had filed a formal civil claim citing breach of fiduciary duty, a specific and serious legal term that applied because Marcus had been given account access under a formal arrangement of trust, with documented obligations he had not fulfilled.
The $54,000 was not a gray area. It was, in the clean, unambiguous language of Helen's filing, theft by a person in a position of trust. He called me 11 times before noon. I let every call go to voicemail. On the 12th call, just after 2 o'clock, I picked up. The voice on the other end was not the voice of the man who had sent me a thumbs-up emoji on his birthday. It was the voice of someone genuinely frightened for the first time, stripped of the easy confidence that had insulated him from consequences his entire adult life. "Mum." His voice cracked on the word. "Mum, what is this?" "It's a civil claim, Marcus," I said. "Helen can explain the details if you'd like her number." Why didn't you call me? Why didn't you tell me you were angry?" I thought about that for a moment. "Because angry mothers," I said, "can be managed." I didn't want to be managed. There was a long silence. "I would have paid it back," he said finally. "Marcus," I said gently, "you had 11 months before I filed. You called me every few weeks. You sent me a photo of your new car in October. You never mentioned it once." He had no answer for that. The case was settled out of court 7 months later. The full amount, $54,000 plus Helen's fees, which Marcus paid, was repaid in structured installments drawn directly from the proceeds of his firm, which he had quietly restructured rather than face a public civil judgment. His wife left him 4 months after the filing. I don't know whether the case was the cause or simply the thing that finally made the cracks visible. I did not feel satisfied by that. I felt, if anything, a mild and distant sadness, the same sadness you feel watching a house you used to love fall into disrepair. Marcus came to see me in September of the following year. He drove the 4 hours himself, alone, and knocked on the door rather than letting himself in with the key he still had. I noticed that. I didn't say anything about it, but I noticed. We sat on the back porch and watched the garden for a while, without speaking. The roses were, in fact, coming in beautifully. "I've been seeing a therapist," he said eventually. "Good," I said. "She asked me what kind of relationship I want with you going forward." "What did you tell her?"
He was quiet for a long time.
Long enough that a blackbird landed on the fence post and flew away again. "I told her I wanted the kind where I'd earned it," he said. I looked at my son, the gray appearing at his temples, the lines around his eyes that hadn't been there 3 years ago, the hands that were clasped in his lap rather than gesturing confidently the way they used to, and I felt something shift. Not forgiveness, exactly. Not yet. Something earlier than that. Something that felt like the first small crack of light under a door that had been shut for a very long time. "That's the right answer," I said. I went inside and made 2 cups of tea. I am 61 years old. I have spent most of my adult life believing that being a good mother meant absorbing whatever my child needed, financially, emotionally, practically, without complaint and without limit. I believed that love, to be real, had to be unconditional. And I was wrong. Not about love. Love can be unconditional. But care, attention, access, trust, money, those are not love. Those are the expressions of love. And expressions of love, given without boundary to someone who has stopped deserving them, don't strengthen a relationship. They hollow it out. They teach the other person that there is no bottom to what they can take. My silence was not weakness. My smile was not surrender. My waiting was not passivity. It was the most powerful thing I had ever done because it removed from Marcus the one tool he had always relied on: my reaction, my guilt, my need to fix the pain I could see on his face, even when that pain was entirely of his own making. When I stopped reacting, he had nothing left to work with. And for the first time in 34 years, he had to sit alone in the wreckage of his own choices with no mother rushing in to clear it away. That is what finally changed him. Not my anger. Not my tears. Not the money. My stillness. If this story reached something in you, share it with someone who needs to hear that patience is not the same as weakness. That smiling and waiting can be the bravest thing a person does. Leave a comment and tell me, have you ever had to go quiet to win? I read every single one. And if you aren't subscribed yet, do it now. The next story is already written, and I promise you, it will hit just as hard.